In the dead of night on August 2, 2015, a 911 call came through from a quiet home in Davidson County, North Carolina. The voice on the line was calm, disturbingly calm. A man was dead, the caller said. He'd been attacking his wife. The caller, a retired FBI agent, claimed he'd acted in defense. But when authorities arrived, what they found was not a struggle. It was a brutal killing. This is the story of Jason Corbett, an Irish father of two who had already lost the love of his life once, only to fall into a second relationship that would end in betrayal, manipulation, and murder. Jason Corbett was a man devoted to his family. Born in Limerick, Ireland, he was happily married to his wife Mags, and together they had two young children, Jack and Sarah. But in 2006, tragedy struck when Mags died suddenly from an asthma attack. Jason was shattered. With two small children to raise, he was left reeling, not just emotionally, but practically. Needing help, he hired an American nanny named Molly Martens, a 24-year-old from Tennessee. Molly came from a respectable family. Her father, Thomas Martens, was a retired FBI agent. To everyone around them, she seemed like a kind and helpful presence. But things would change, and not for the better. Over time, Jason and Molly grew close. He was still grieving, and she became more involved in the family's life. Eventually, they married in 2011 and moved to North Carolina to start fresh. On the surface, it seemed like a second chance at happiness. But Jason's family in Ireland began noticing troubling signs. Behind the smiling photos and American dream exterior, the marriage was far from perfect. Jason confided to family members that Molly was controlling, jealous, and emotionally unstable. One major point of tension was her obsession with adopting Jack and Sarah, something Jason consistently refused to allow. He began to grow increasingly anxious. He told friends and family that he didn't trust Molly, and that she was making life difficult for him and the kids. He even made a chilling remark to his sister. "If anything happens to me, look to Molly." That warning would soon become heartbreakingly relevant. At 3 a.m. on August 2, 2015, a call came into 911. It was Thomas Martens, Molly's father. He claimed he had struck Jason with a baseball bat to protect his daughter, who was being attacked. Molly echoed the same claim. Jason, she said, was choking her. She feared for her life. When first responders arrived, the scene they walked into was one of horrific violence. Jason Corbett was lying dead on the floor of the master bedroom. He had been bludgeoned repeatedly, not just with the bat, but also with a concrete paving brick. There were deep wounds to his skull, multiple fractures, and massive blood loss. It was clear this wasn't just a scuffle gone wrong. It looked like a frenzied personal execution. The medical examiner's report confirmed what investigators suspected. Jason had been struck at least 10 times in the head. The force was excessive. The wounds indicated that he may have been attacked while asleep. His blood-soaked pillow suggested the first blows were delivered in bed. Even more telling, Molly showed no signs of choking or injury. No bruises, no defensive wounds, no red marks. Nothing that indicated she had been attacked. Her story, and her father's, quickly began to unravel. On the 911 call, Thomas Martens sounded surprisingly composed. In the background, Molly could be heard discussing how to explain what happened, almost as if they were preparing their legal defense in real time. For investigators, it wasn't self-defense. It was premeditated. It took 2 years for the case to go to trial. In 2017, Molly and Thomas Martens were both charged with second-degree murder. The prosecution's case was built on forensics and motive. They portrayed Molly as obsessed with control, especially over the children. Jason's refusal to let her adopt them had caused deep resentment. Her father, prosecutors argued, was not a hero protecting his daughter, but a man who helped her commit murder and cover it up. There was no history of Jason being violent. In fact, his children, who were home that night, heard nothing that indicated a fight or a struggle. Instead, they described a home where tension was growing, and their stepmother was becoming increasingly erratic. The jury sided with the evidence. Molly and Thomas were both found guilty of second-degree murder and sentenced to 20 to 25 years in prison. Jason's family in Ireland, especially his sister and brother-in-law who fought for custody of Jack and Sarah, believed justice had been served. But the story was far from over. In 2020, the North Carolina Court of Appeals overturned the convictions. The court ruled that the original trial judge had improperly excluded testimony that could have supported the defense's claim that Jason was abusive, a claim for which no credible evidence had ever been produced. But that still swayed the court enough to warrant a retrial. Instead of facing a second trial, Molly and her father agreed to a plea deal. In 2023, both pled guilty to voluntary manslaughter and received a sentence of 44 to 82 months. But because of time already served, they were released that same year, just under 4 years after Jason's brutal killing. To Jason's family and much of the Irish public, it felt like a gut punch. The killers of a father, a brother, and a son were now free. Jason's children, now teenagers, were returned to Ireland after the murder. They live with their aunt and uncle and have tried to rebuild their lives after years of trauma and court battles. His family continues to defend his memory, insisting that the abuse claims were fabricated and that Jason was a victim, not only of a brutal murder, but of a legal system that failed to protect him in the end. The case has prompted wider conversations about domestic violence claims in court, the limits of plea deals, and the weight of forensic evidence versus hearsay. In Ireland, Jason Corbett is remembered as a devoted father who rebuilt his life after loss, only to be betrayed by the very person he trusted to help raise his children. The murder of Jason Corbett is a story about how love can turn dark, how grief can leave people vulnerable, and how systems meant to deliver justice can sometimes fall short. A man was beaten to death with a bat and a brick. His killers were convicted. Then they walked free. Was this justice, or just another tragic loophole in a flawed system?